Antoinette Maxwell was 34 years old when her husband of 7 years walked out the door with an overnight bag, kissing her goodbye for a vendor conference that had been canceled 3 weeks earlier. Damon didn't know she'd seen the text, didn't know she'd already pulled the hotel folio with a second name on it, Selena Vance, his own social media hire, 28 years old and fully aware of the wedding ring he still wore. 3 years ago, Antoinette had remortgaged her late father's house to fund Damon's business. Her signature was on every loan. Her money built the company he now bragged about building alone. He texted her once a day for 3 days, short and careless, certain she was home waiting, certain she would never check, never know, never act. He had no idea what she'd already confirmed. And as his car turned back onto their street that third evening, Antoinette stood at the window, watching him come home to a house that no longer wanted him in it. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tap of Tony's fingers on her laptop keyboard. It was 11:04 p.m. Everyone else on Clover Street had their lights off, but Tony Maxwell was still at the kitchen table, still in her work clothes, still doing the thing she always did on Thursday nights, reconciling the books for Maxwell Premium Detail and Restoration, the company her money had built. She had a system, color-coded tabs in the spreadsheet, one column for income, one for expenses, one she called the gap column, where she flagged anything that didn't quite line up. 3 years ago, that gap column had saved the business from going under in its first winter, a double-billed vendor charge she caught at 1 a.m. that Damon would have missed entirely. He'd kissed her on the forehead and said she was brilliant. Then he'd gone to sleep, and she'd finished the audit herself. That was usually how it went. She took a slow sip of chamomile tea and scrolled through the most recent business card activity. Fuel charges, supply restocks, a lunch receipt from a client meeting 2 weeks ago. All normal. She had almost reached the bottom of the list when something caught her eye. The Alderton Boutique Hotel, $412, October 14th. She paused. She remembered that one. She had asked about it the day it posted. Damon had been sitting right there at this same table, glancing at his phone, unbothered. Client entertainment, babe. Had to take the Dillard account guy somewhere nice. He's picky. He hadn't looked up when he said it. He had scrolled right past the conversation like it was nothing. She had let it go. Not because she believed him, because she needed more than a feeling before she said another word. That was the difference between Tony and most people. She didn't argue with shadows. She waited for the light. Now she looked at the charge again. $412. She opened a second browser tab and pulled up the Alderton's website. It loaded slowly. A full-page photo of soft lighting and white linen, the kind of place that charged that much for one night, not a dinner. The kind of place that had a checkout date, not just a tab. She sat with that for a moment. Then she opened the business cards app on her phone and took a screenshot of the full charge detail before Damon could log in and delete the notification. She had learned a long time ago to capture things the moment she saw them. Evidence had a way of disappearing around Damon. Not always on purpose, but it disappeared. The screenshot saved with a soft click. She closed the app, set her phone face down on the table, and went back to the spreadsheet. Upstairs, she could hear him, the zip of his bag, the heavy pull of his closet door, the sound of his shoes dropping one at a time onto the hardwood floor, the way he always set them out the night before a trip. Damon Maxwell had never packed his own bag quietly in his life. She heard him come to the top of the stairs once, probably checking if she'd come up. She didn't move. A minute later, his footsteps retreated back toward the bedroom. She finished the reconciliation at 11:49 p.m., flagged 2 items for follow-up, and saved the file. Then she closed the laptop, washed her mug in the sink, and went to bed. She didn't say goodnight. Morning came in gray and slow, the kind of November light that never fully committed. Tony was already dressed when Damon came downstairs with his bag. She was standing at the counter with her coffee, her work bag on the chair, her keys in her hand, ready to leave. He looked good, the way he always looked when he was going somewhere. Fresh haircut from Tuesday, clean jacket, the dark cologne she used to love. He set his bag down by the door and walked over to her with a smile, that easy, practiced smile that had worked on her 100 times before. 3 days, he said. I'll call you tonight. Okay, she said. He put his arms around her. She let him. She stood still and felt the familiar weight of him and said nothing, her coffee cup still in one hand. Then he pulled back. His phone buzzed on the counter. Just once. He reached for it without thinking, reflex, not guilt, and the screen lit up for exactly 2 seconds before he turned it face down. But 2 seconds was enough. She had been a forensic auditor for 9 years. She read numbers faster than most people read words. And what she read in those 2 seconds, in the small white preview box at the top of his screen, was this: "See you tonight." The name above it was not one she recognized. Damon picked up his bag and kissed her on the cheek. "Don't work too hard," he said. The front door closed behind him. Tony stood at the counter. She didn't move. She listened to the company van back out of the driveway. She listened to it reach the end of the street. Then she set down her coffee, very carefully, and she picked up her phone. The coffee went cold on the counter. Tony didn't notice. She was already at the kitchen table with her laptop open, her phone beside her, moving through screens the way she moved through audit files, quietly, methodically, one layer at a time. She had registered access to Maxwell Premium's accounts. She had always had it. She was the one who set up the systems, built the vendor portal, linked the calendar, created the shared business drive. Damon could barely find the login page without texting her for the password. She started with the calendar. The vendor conference was listed there. AutoPro Southeast Regional, Atlanta, Georgia, November 7th through 9th. She clicked into the event details. There was a registration confirmation number attached. She copied it, opened a new tab, and went to the AutoPro Southeast website. It took her less than 2 minutes to find what she was looking for. A banner across the top of the event page. Red letters, very clear. Notice: AutoPro Southeast Regional Conference. Atlanta has been postponed. New dates TBD. All registered attendees have been notified via email. She clicked through to the notification archive. The cancellation email had gone out on October 18th, 3 weeks ago. She opened the business email account she still managed. She searched AutoPro. The cancellation email was right there, sitting in the inbox, unopened by Damon, but delivered. Read receipted to his linked phone. He knew. She closed that tab and sat for a moment with her hands flat on the table. Then she went back to the hotel charge. The Alderton kept digital folios for business accounts. Maxwell Premium had stayed there once before. A genuine client dinner, 2 years ago, so the account was on file. Tony had set that up too. She logged into the business travel portal, pulled up the account history, and found the October 14th charge. The folio loaded in a separate window. Itemized. 1 night. Room 214. Dinner for 2. Charge to the room. Minibar. Late checkout. She scanned down to the guest registration field. Primary guest, D. Maxwell. Additional registered guest, S. Vance. She read it twice, not because she didn't understand it, but because she was making sure she felt the full weight of it before she did anything else. S. Vance. Selena Vance, 28 years old, hired 4 months ago to run Maxwell Premium's social media and modernize the brand. Tony had seen her twice in person, once at the shop, once at a company cookout in September. Pretty, polished, the kind of young that photographs well. Damon had described her as a business investment. Tony took a screenshot of the folio. Then she took a second one, zoomed in on the guest line. She saved both to a folder she labeled simply MP Audit, November. She closed the laptop. Outside, a car passed slowly down Clover Street. The neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. Tony sat in the silence and breathed. She did not call him. She did not text him. She did not do the thing her chest was pulling her toward, which was to pick up the phone and say his name and demand that he tell her the truth she already had sitting in a folder on her desktop. Not yet. She had one piece. She wanted all of them first. The next morning, her phone rang at 8:47 a.m. It was Renee, Damon's older sister, the woman who had co-signed the original business loan because Tony's credit was strong, but her employment history was short on paper, and the bank had wanted 2 signatures. "Hey," Renee said. She sounded careful, like someone choosing their words slowly. "You got a minute?" "I do," Tony said. "Okay." A pause. "So, Damon called me last night. Said he was out of town for a few days handling a supplier situation. Said one of the van vendors had a warehouse fire down in Macon, and he had to go down and sort out the inventory." Tony was quiet for a moment. "That's interesting." "Yeah." Another pause. "Because he told you the conference thing, right? The Atlanta one?" "He did." "Tony," Renee's voice dropped. "That's 2 different stories." "I know," Tony said. She told Renee about the cancellation email, about the hotel folio. She kept her voice even, the way she kept her voice even when she was presenting findings to a client. Just facts, just what the document said. Renee was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tight. "I'm running an errand this afternoon near Buckhead. The Aldertons over there." Tony didn't say anything. "I'll let you know what I see," Renee said. The photo came in at 2:17 p.m. No caption, just the image. The company van, white, navy lettering, Maxwell Premium Detail and Restoration printed down the side, parked at an angle in front of the Aldertons' entrance. And coming around from the passenger side, mid-laugh, her hand on Damon's arm, was a young woman in a tan coat. Tony had seen that coat before, at the September cookout. She zoomed in slowly with 2 fingers until Selena Vance's face filled the screen. Clear as a column that didn't balance. Clear as a number that didn't lie. Yvonne lived 12 minutes away. Tony was there in 10. She didn't call ahead. She just drove, with her phone face down in the passenger seat and both hands on the wheel. And when Yvonne opened the door and saw her face, she didn't ask questions. She just stepped back and let her in. They sat at Yvonne's kitchen table with the laptop between them, and the photo pulled up on Tony's phone. Yvonne looked at it for a long moment. Then she set the phone down flat, folded her hands, and looked at Tony the way she always did when she was about to say something useful instead of something kind. "Okay," Yvonne said. "Tell me about the business." Tony told her. All of it. The remortgage on her father's house, the 401k loan, the system she built, the accounts she managed, the way her name appeared nowhere in the marketing, not on the website, not on the social pages, not on the van. Just the money. Just the work. None of the credit. Yvonne listened without interrupting. When Tony finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You know what marital waste is?" she asked. "Vaguely," Tony said. "It means when one spouse deliberately burns through marital assets for something that benefits only them," Yvonne said. "Affair travel, gifts to the other person, charging a hotel room and a minibar and a late checkout to a business account that you funded, while lying to your wife about where you are." She paused. "That's not just cheating, Tony. That's a financial claim. It changes how a court looks at asset division." Tony was quiet. "The business," Yvonne continued, "was seeded with your money, your father's house, your retirement account. If his name is the only one on the operating documents, that doesn't erase your contribution. It just means someone has to make the argument clearly and early." She tapped the table once, "before he gets home and starts moving things around." "He comes back tonight," Tony said. Yvonne nodded slowly. "Then we don't wait." They made 2 calls and drafted 1 document in the next hour. Yvonne's voice on the phone was brisk, professional, giving nothing away. She spoke to her paralegal first, then to a contact at a records office she wouldn't name out loud. When she hung up the second time, she slid a single printed page across the table. "Sign there," she said. "This starts the process. It doesn't lock you in, but it establishes today as the date you acted. That matters." Tony picked up the pen. Her hand was steady. She signed. "Good," Yvonne said. "Now go home, and take Renee with you." Renee was already parked in front of the house when Tony pulled up at 4:15. She got out of her car with a duffel bag on one shoulder and a look on her face that was not angry exactly, but had been decided. "I already called the locksmith," she said. "He's on his way." Tony looked at her for a moment. "You didn't have to do all that." "I co-signed that loan," Renee said simply. "That makes this my business, too." They went inside together. They were methodical about it. That was the only word for it. Not rushed, not frantic. Methodical. The way Tony did everything that mattered. She went upstairs first. She pulled Damon's clothes from the closet. The good suits, the weekend shirts, the stack of folded jeans he kept on the second shelf, and carried them down in armloads. Renee brought the shoes. 2 trips. 3. They brought down his golf bag from the hall closet, the clubs rattling softly against each other as Renee set it on the grass. Then the tools. The wooden box lived in the back of the garage. Old, dark-stained, latched with a rusted clasp. Damon's late father's tools, a hammer, 2 handsaws, a set of chisels wrapped in cloth, were the only things of real sentiment Damon had ever kept. Tony carried the box out herself. She set it at the edge of the lawn, not carelessly, but gently, the clasp facing up. She stepped back and looked at it all. The clothes were folded and stacked, not thrown. The shoes were paired. The golf bag stood upright against the low front hedge. The wooden box sat apart from everything else, given its own small space. Neat, deliberate, exactly the way she did everything. The locksmith left at 6:40. At 7:12, headlights swept across the front of the house. The company van eased to a stop at the curb. Damon got out with his overnight bag on his shoulder, his phone already in his hand, already somewhere else in his head. He made it halfway up the front walk before he stopped. He looked at the clothes. He looked at the golf bag. He looked at the wooden box. He looked at the door. She heard him try the handle once, then again. The sound of it was very quiet from where she stood in the front room, away from the window, just listening. Across the street, the Hendersons' porch light clicked on. Down the block, someone's front door opened and didn't close. "Tony." His voice was low at first, confused more than anything, like a man who had walked into the wrong room and was still trying to place how it happened. "Tony." Flooring knocked at 8:17 in the morning. Not the handle this time, an actual knock. 3 slow raps, like you'd spent the night somewhere practicing how to sound reasonable. Tony had been awake since 6. She'd made coffee, eaten half a piece of toast, and sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded around her mug, waiting. Not because she'd known exactly when he'd come, just because she knew he would. She opened the door. He looked tired. His shirt was the same one from yesterday, collar softened, one side half untucked. He'd run a hand through his hair recently enough that it still showed the tracks. He had no bag with him, just himself, standing on the front step with his jaw set in that particular way he used when he was trying to look humble without actually being it. "Can I come in?" he asked. Tony stepped back from the door. He sat at the kitchen table. She poured him a coffee without asking and set it in front of him and sat across from him with her own mug and said nothing. He got there eventually. "I made a mistake," he said. The words came out smooth, practiced, like he'd said them to himself in a mirror that morning, or out loud in whoever's bathroom he'd borrowed. "It didn't mean anything," he continued. "Selena, it just got out of hand. You know how those things happen." He looked up at her. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But I need you to know it's over. I ended it." Tony looked at him. She thought about the photo Renee had sent. Damon and Selina stepping out of the company van, his hand at the small of her back, both of them laughing at something neither of them knew would matter later. She thought about the hotel folio, with Selina's name printed beneath his. She thought about the conference that had been cancelled for 3 weeks, while he'd packed his bag and kissed her cheek and driven away. She said, "Okay." Damon blinked. "Okay?" "I hear you," she said. He leaned forward slightly, recalibrating. She could see him doing it, reading her the way he always had, looking for the cry, the raised voice, the place where she'd break open and he could step inside and start managing her again. He'd done it before. After the time he'd overspent on equipment without telling her. After the weekend he'd gone unreachable for 2 days and come back with a story that didn't line up. She'd always given him something to work with, a crack, an opening. She gave him nothing now. "I just need you to know I'm sorry," he said. The word came out heavy, deliberate, like he was setting something valuable on the table between them. "And I know this is going to take time. I'm not asking for everything right now. I just need to know there's a chance." Tony wrapped both hands around her mug. "I need some time to think," she said. It was the most truthful thing she'd said to him in days. She did need time, not to decide. That had been decided the moment she'd signed Yvonne's paper. But to know everything before she moved. She would not act twice. She would act once, with the full picture, and it would be enough. Damon nodded. Relief moved across his face like a cloud passing. His shoulders dropped a 1/4 inch. "That's fair," he said. "That's all I'm asking." He finished the coffee. He talked for a few more minutes about nothing, the business, a client call he had that afternoon, something about the van needing an oil change, and she listened and nodded in the right places. And when he stood up to leave, he paused at the kitchen doorway and looked back at her. "I'll fix this," he said. "I promise you, Tony." She smiled, small, measured. He left. She washed both mugs, dried them, set them back in the cabinet. Then she sat down, opened her laptop, and got back to work. Renee called at 7:20 that evening. Tony was in the middle of eating soup at the counter when her phone lit up. She answered on the second ring. "I found something." Renee's voice was flat in the way it got when she was controlling something bigger underneath. "In the business drive, the shared loan folder." Tony set her spoon down. "There's a second loan," Renee said, "taken out 6 months ago against the business. I never knew about it. My name's not on it." A pause. "But yours is." "I never signed anything 6 months ago," Tony said. "I know," Renee said. "I'm looking at the signature right now." Another pause, shorter this time. "It's not right, Tony. The letters, the way you make your T, the way you close your E. This isn't you. Somebody copied it." Tony stood very still at the counter. "Where did the money go?" she asked. She heard Renee exhale slowly, like she'd been holding it since she found the file. "An apartment lease," Renee said, "and a car, a leased SUV." She went quiet for a moment. "Both in Selina Vance's name." Yvonne spread the loan documents across her dining room table like she was laying out a body for examination. She didn't rush. She put on reading glasses Tony had never seen her wear before, and she went through each page slowly, one hand resting flat on the paper, the other holding a yellow highlighter she hadn't uncapped yet. Tony sat across from her and waited. Outside, it was a gray morning, the kind where the light never fully arrives. A sprinkler ticked somewhere down the street, steady and mechanical. "Here," Yvonne said finally. She turned the second page around so Tony could see it. Her finger rested just below the signature line. "Look at the bottom loop on the X." Tony looked. She'd signed her name 10,000 times in her life, on closing documents, on tax filings, on the original loan paperwork that had started all of this 3 years ago. She knew exactly how her hand moved when it made an X, the small upward drag at the end, the way the loop closed tight rather than open. This one was open, wide and loose, like someone had looked at a sample and tried to remember it from across a room. "That's not mine," Tony said. "No," Yvonne agreed. "It is not." She uncapped the highlighter then and drew a careful line beneath it, turned to the third page and did the same thing, then the fifth. Every signature, highlighted in clean yellow lines, like evidence already prepared for a courtroom. "How many pages?" Tony asked. 7 signatures across the full document, Yvonne said, every one of them wrong in the same way. Tony set the page down. She pressed her fingertips together and stared at the table for a moment, not because she was surprised. She had stopped being surprised 2 days ago. But there was something about seeing it in print, the forgery, flat and provable and real, that made it land differently than the hotel photo had. The photo was about who he was. This was about what he thought he could get away with. "What do we do with it?" Tony asked. "First thing," Yvonne said, pulling off her glasses and setting them on the table, "is we make sure nothing else moves." She was already reaching for her phone. "I'm filing a preservation notice this morning. It freezes the business accounts. No transfers, no withdrawals, no creative bookkeeping while we build the rest of the case." She looked at Tony directly. "He won't know why the accounts are locked until it's too late to do anything about it." Tony nodded once. Yvonne dialed. Tony sat at Yvonne's kitchen counter while Yvonne worked the phone in the next room. She could hear the calm, legal cadence of her voice, measured and exact, the way Yvonne always got when she was converting a personal situation into a professional one. It was its own kind of weapon. Tony recognized it because she used the same one. She pulled out her phone and texted Renee. "Still digging?" The reply came back in under a minute. "Been at it since 6. There's more in here. Give me another hour." Yvonne was back at the table within 20 minutes. She folded her hands and said simply, "Done. Accounts are frozen as of 9:42. Tony looked at her. "He's going to notice." "Probably by end of day," Yvonne said. "That's fine. Let him notice. Noticing isn't the same as being able to do anything." She tilted her head slightly. "The documents are preserved. The funds are locked. He can knock all he wants." Tony's phone buzzed at 11:30. It was a file from Renee. No text above it, just the attachment, dropped into the message thread like Renee couldn't figure out what words to put in front of it. Tony opened it. Maxwell Premium, Brand Modernization Proposal, prepared by Selena Vance. She started reading. It was professionally formatted, clean font, section headers, color-coded charts tracking social engagement and follower demographics. It looked like something a real agency would produce. Selena had made sure of that. Tony read past the introduction, past the content strategy section, past the competitor analysis. She found it on page 9, under a heading that read, Stakeholder Alignment. In plain, business-like language, Selena had written that the brand currently carried what she called legacy overhead, defined in a footnote as non-revenue-generating associations that create visual inconsistency and dilute target audience appeal. In the recommendation column beside it, a single line. Streamline family optics out of brand-facing materials. Prioritize fresh identity. Tony read it twice. She thought about the anniversary photo, the one Damon had posted 8 months ago, the one he'd cropped before he put it online so that only he was visible. She'd noticed it then and said nothing, told herself it was a framing choice, told herself it didn't mean what it looked like. It meant exactly what it looked like. This hadn't been carelessness. This hadn't been a husband who drifted and made a stupid choice. Selena had written a document. She had put Tony's removal in a slide deck and given it a category and a recommendation column and submitted it like a business proposal. Tony set her phone on the table. She looked at Yvonne. "Can I take the business?" she said, "instead of just my half of it?" The name appeared on page 3 of the original founding documents. Tony had pulled the file from the shared business drive the night before, after Renee had gone home and the house had gone quiet. She'd sat at the same kitchen table where she reconciled the books every month and read through 12 pages of legal language until she found it. Isaiah Webb, co-founder, Maxwell Premium Detail and Restoration, LLC. She'd stared at the name for a long time. She knew Damon had bought someone out early on. He'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, in the way he mentioned things he considered settled, quickly, with a small shrug, already moving on. A creative differences situation, he'd called it. He'd said it like it was nothing, like it was ancient history. But Tony worked in forensic auditing. She knew that when someone described a business dispute with 2 words and a shrug, there was usually a longer story underneath it. She called Renee that night. Isaiah Webb ran his detailing supply company out of a low building off Industrial Park Drive, 20 minutes east of the city. The parking lot was clean. The signage was modest. A small hand-lettered sign near the entrance read, "Webb Supply, by appointment." They hadn't made one. Renee knocked anyway. The man who opened the door was tall, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a clipboard in one hand. He looked at them both. Then he looked at Tony a half-second longer, like he was placing her face somewhere.
"You're Damon's wife," he said. "I was," Tony said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not surprise, more like recognition. The kind that comes when something you suspected a long time ago finally walks up and introduces itself. "Come in," he said. The office was small and organized. File cabinets lined one wall, a whiteboard covered another, filled with inventory numbers. Isaiah cleared 2 chairs and sat across from them, the clipboard set aside, his hands loose on his knees. "How can I help?" he said. Tony set the founding document on the desk between them and pointed to his name. "I want to understand how you left," she said. Isaiah looked at the paper. He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "He moved money first. Small amounts, early on. Reclassified expenses so the books looked like I wasn't contributing as much as I was." He spoke evenly, like he'd told this story in his own head enough times that the anger had worn smooth. "By the time I realized what the numbers looked like on paper, they'd been looking that way for 8 months. He had documentation. I had my word." Renee made a small sound. "He did the same thing to Tony," she said. "Almost exactly." Isaiah nodded slowly. He didn't look shocked. "I figured it was a pattern," he said. "Took someone else showing up for me to know for sure." Tony folded her hands on the desk. "There's a second loan against the business, taken 6 months ago. My signature on it is forged." "You have proof of the forgery?" 7 pages of it." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he stood and went to the nearest file cabinet. He opened the second drawer from the bottom, flipped through a row of hanging folders, and pulled out a manila envelope that was thick with paper. He set it on the desk. "Original partnership agreement," he said. "My copies. I kept everything." He opened the envelope and found the page he was looking for on the first try. "Section 11, Clause 4. He turned the page so they could read it. "Right of first refusal. Any transfer or restructuring of ownership shares requires my written consent or the option to match the terms." He tapped the clause with one finger. "Damon never dissolved it properly. It's still active." The room was very quiet for a moment. Renee looked at Tony. Tony read the clause once more. Then she looked up at Isaiah. "He forgot it was there," she said. "He forgot I'd remember," Isaiah said. They were back at Tony's car when her phone rang. It was her assistant, Deja, calling from the office. "Tony?" Deja's voice was low and uncomfortable, the tone of someone reporting something they'd rather not. "There's a man here. He brought flowers. He's been standing in the lobby for about 10 minutes and he's talking pretty loud." Tony closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "I'm 20 minutes out," she said. She was there in 14.
The lobby of Harmon Health Partners had glass walls that faced the street. Tony could see him before she even got through the door. Damon, standing near the reception desk, still holding a bouquet of white lilies going soft at the edges. 3 of her coworkers were visible just inside the hallway. They were pretending not to watch. He saw her come in and opened his arms slightly. His face arranged itself into something sorrowful and open. "Tony," he said, loud enough to carry. "I just need 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Before she could answer, a door opened to her right. Gary Ellison, her direct supervisor, stepped into the lobby. He was 53 years old, had managed auditors for 2 decades, and had received Yvonne's legal letter 4 days ago. He looked at Damon the way he looked at a discrepancy he'd already flagged. "Sir," Gary said, "this is a place of business. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The clause was 4 sentences long. Tony had read it so many times she could have said it from memory, but she read it again that morning anyway, sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold beside her, the founding document flat on the surface in front of her. 4 sentences, buried in Section 11 of a 12-page agreement that Damon had signed 11 years ago and apparently never thought about again. Isaiah's signature was at the bottom of every page. Damon's was too. Yvonne arrived at 9 with a tote bag full of folders and the kind of focused energy that meant she'd already been working for hours. She dropped into the chair across from Tony, pulled out a legal pad covered in neat, tight handwriting, and got straight to it. "Here's where we are," she said. "Isaiah's clause is active. It never lapsed. Any restructuring of ownership shares requires his written consent or his right to match terms." She tapped the legal pad. "Isaiah has already signed a written statement exercising that right, in your favor, which means he's not stepping into ownership himself. He's assigning his consent to the restructuring going toward you." "Can he do that?" "His attorney reviewed it yesterday. Yes." Yvonne turned to the next page. "Renee holds a co-signer interest tied to the original loan. It's small, but it's documented, and it gives her standing to vote on managing member status under the LLC operating agreement." She looked up. "Damon wrote that operating agreement himself, by the way. Didn't use a lawyer, just downloaded a template." Tony picked up her coffee, realized it was cold, and set it back down. "So we have 3 votes." "We have 3 votes. Damon has 1. Yvonne let that sit for a moment. "We filed the removal motion today. Renee signs. Isaiah's statement is attached. I've already drafted the amended operating agreement listing you as sole managing member." She slid a document across the table. "I just need your signature here." Tony read it carefully, all the way through, every line. Then she signed it. The call from Renee came that afternoon. "She reached out to him," Renee said. She didn't say who, but she didn't need to. "Damon called me this morning, all worked up. Said Selena told him they should. I think his exact words were, she said they needed space until the legal stuff cools down." Tony stood at her kitchen window, watching the backyard. The garden her father had planted along the fence line years ago. The same fence, the same yard. Nothing about it had changed. "He's upset about it?" Tony asked. "Upset is one word." Renee's voice was dry. "He sounded like a man who just found out the life raft had a hole in it." Tony didn't say anything for a moment. She thought about Selena's pitch deck, legacy overhead, the careful, professional language used to describe removing a real person from the story she had funded. Selena had written that document with the calm confidence of someone who believed she was on the winning side of something. She had built her plan on Damon's business like it was solid ground. Now the ground was moving, and she was stepping back. "Let her step back," Tony said quietly. "She's not going anywhere." Renee understood what she meant. "No," she agreed. "She's really not." Yvonne drafted the settlement letter over 3 days. It was sealed, single-spaced, 11 pages. It contained every document Renee had pulled from the shared drive, a summary of the forensic comparison confirming the forged signature, a copy of the second loan agreement, Isaiah's signed statement, the amended operating agreement, and the preservation notice already on file with the court. It did not threaten. It did not ask. It stated. On the fourth day, Yvonne called Damon's personal cell phone. Tony was in the next room and could hear Yvonne's voice through the wall. Measured, courteous, giving nothing away. Mr. Maxwell, this is Yvonne Carter, attorney for Antoinette Maxwell. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss final settlement terms, Tuesday at 10 at my office. A pause. Yes, there's room to discuss the details in person. Another pause, shorter this time. We'll see you then. She came into the kitchen and set her phone on the counter. He said yes, Yvonne reported. He sounded relieved. Tony nodded slowly. She knew exactly what Damon was picturing. A conference table. His wife on one side, still hoping he'd come home. Room to talk, room to charm, room to negotiate his way back to the thing he thought he still owned. The way he had always talked his way back from things, with just enough remorse and just enough confidence and just enough patience for the other person to fold. He was planning what to say on the drive over. He was already composing it. Tony pulled her copy of the amended operating agreement from the folder and set it neatly in her bag beside the sealed letter. She had nothing left to compose. Everything that needed to be said was already in writing. Damon arrived 4 minutes late. Tony noticed because she had been watching the clock. Not anxiously, just noting it. 4 minutes was enough time to park, check his reflection in the car window, and decide on an expression. She knew how he prepared for rooms he expected to win. He pushed open the glass door to Yvonne's office suite with one hand in his jacket pocket, the other holding a travel cup of coffee. His shoulders relaxed. He was wearing the charcoal blazer he wore to the business loan signing 3 years ago. She recognized it immediately. He had chosen it on purpose. The blazer said, serious but reasonable. It said, I'm a man worth working with. He saw Tony first. Then he saw Renee, seated to Tony's left. Then Isaiah. The relaxed shoulders didn't drop all at once. It happened in stages, like air leaving something slowly. His eyes moved across the table once, then again, recalculating. He pulled out the chair across from Tony and sat down, set his coffee in front of him, adjusted his jacket. Didn't realize this was going to be a group thing, he said. His voice was easy, careful. He looked at Renee. Renee, didn't know you were going to be here. Renee looked back at him without smiling. I know, she said. He glanced at Isaiah. Something passed across his face, not quite recognition and not quite fear, something between the two. Isaiah? Damon, Isaiah said. Just the name, nothing attached to it. Yvonne set a copy of the sealed letter in front of Damon and left it closed. Thank you for coming in. We'll keep this straightforward. She nodded once to Tony. Tony folded her hands on the table. She didn't look angry. She didn't look wounded. She looked exactly the way she looked when she sat down with a client's financial records and already knew what she was going to find. Composed, prepared, finished with guessing. The second loan, she said. She slid the first document across the table. Taken against Maxwell Premium 6 months ago. $240,000. The repayment schedule starts next quarter. She let him look at it. Your signature is on it. Mine is also on it. She paused. I didn't sign it. Damon looked down at the page. His jaw tightened. I had the signature compared by a forensic document examiner, Tony continued. The report is on page 3 of the letter in front of you. The signature doesn't match any of the 14 samples pulled from documents I actually signed. She slid a second page across. The loan proceeds traced to 2 disbursements. The first funded a 12-month apartment lease. The second funded a 36-month SUV lease. She tapped the page once, both in Selena Vance's name. Damon opened his mouth. I'm not finished, Tony said. He closed it. She slid the third document across, Selena's pitch deck. She had printed the relevant page, just the one, and placed it on top. The heading was clean and professional. The language below it was not cruel. It was something worse than cruel. It was clinical. Legacy overhead. Recommend streamlining family optics from brand presence going forward. Damon stared at it. She sent that to you 8 months ago, Tony said. You kept it in the shared drive under a marketing folder labeled Q3 Assets. She let that settle. I funded this business. I remortgaged my father's house. I pulled from my 401k. I built the spreadsheet system that kept you solvent in year 1 when you were 3 weeks from missing payroll. Her voice didn't rise. And the two of you put it in writing that I was the problem. The room was very quiet. Damon looked across the table at her. His expression had shifted into something she recognized, the beginning of a negotiation. The look that came before, let's be reasonable and we can fix this and you know I love you. Tony, his voice dropped, softened. We've been together 9 years. Whatever she wrote, whatever this looks like. Page 7, Yvonne said calmly. He stopped. Tony nodded. Page 7 is the amended operating agreement. Renee holds a documented co-signer interest under the original loan, which gives her standing to vote on managing member status. Isaiah holds a right of first refusal on any ownership restructuring under the founding agreement you both signed. He exercised that right this week, in writing, in my favor. She looked at him directly. That gives us 3 votes. You have 1. Renee picked up her pen and signed the vote line without looking at her brother. Isaiah signed beneath her. Tony signed last. She set down the pen. You are no longer managing member of Maxwell Premium Detail and Restoration, she said. Your name stays on the registration. You have no operational authority, no signature rights, no account access. She slid one final page across the table. The commercial lease on the Birchfield location was restructured this morning. It's in my name now. Walter Pruitt signed yesterday. Damon sat very still. He looked down at the papers in front of him. All of them. The loan, the signature analysis, the pitch deck, the amended agreement with 3 signatures at the bottom, and a blank line where his would never appear. He had driven here planning what to say. He had nothing left to say. The civil filing took 4 days. Yvonne drafted it with the same precision she brought to everything. Clean language, specific amounts, no room for interpretation. The claim named Selena Vance directly. It listed 2 disbursements from a fraudulently obtained business loan, a 12-month apartment lease, $41,000, and a 36-month SUV lease, $38,000. It noted that Selena had accepted both, knowing the funds came from Maxwell Premium's operating account. It noted she had been present for conversations about the loan's purpose. It noted she had written the pitch deck. That last part was Tony's idea. Yvonne had looked at her across the desk and said, "You sure?" And Tony had said yes without hesitating. The pitch deck wasn't just evidence of motive. It was evidence that Selena understood exactly whose money she was spending and chose to spend it anyway. Yvonne filed on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, a copy had been served to Selena's last known address, the apartment the loan had paid for. Tony knew about the meeting request 2 days before it happened. Selena had sent it through Yvonne's office, formal and careful, asking for 15 minutes. Yvonne had advised against it. Tony had said she wanted to go. They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Yvonne's office. Neutral ground. Public enough that no one could misremember what was said. Selena arrived on time. She was put together in the way someone is when they are trying very hard to look like they are not afraid. Her coat was pressed. Her earrings matched. Her hands, when she wrapped them around her coffee cup, were still. Tony sat across from her and did not order anything. She let the silence run for a moment. Not to be cruel, just because she had nothing to prove by filling it. Selena spoke first. I want you to know I didn't... She stopped. Tried again. What happened between Damon and me? That was... I'm not here about that, Tony said. Selena went quiet. The civil filing is moving forward, Tony said. Yvonne will handle all communication about it. That's not why I asked to meet. She looked at Selena directly. I wanted to tell you something myself. Selena's chin lifted slightly, bracing. Isaiah Webb, Tony said. You know the name? A small hesitation. I know who he is. He knows the local marketing circuit better than either of us realized, Tony said. He worked in it for a long time. He still has relationships there. She kept her voice even. He had a conversation last week with a hiring director at the agency that was bringing you on. A direct conversation, in person. She paused. He told them about the loan, the forged signature, the pitch deck, your name on the leases. The color in Selena's face shifted. The offer was rescinded, Tony said. I don't know if they told you that yet or if you're still waiting to hear, but that's what happened. Selena stared at her. For a moment, she looked like she was going to say something sharp, or defensive, or angry. Then the look passed. What replaced it was quieter and harder to watch. It was the look of someone doing math they already know comes out wrong. I wrote a marketing document, Selena said. Her voice was thin. That's all I... You wrote a plan to remove me from the brand I paid for, Tony said. And then you accepted money from a loan signed with my name. My forged name. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. You knew what it was. It's in your own emails. Selena looked down at her coffee cup. Tony stood up. She pulled on her coat. Yvonne's office will be in touch about restitution. She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Damon called Isaiah on a Thursday. Isaiah knew what the call was before he answered. He answered anyway. I just need someone in my corner right now, Damon said. His voice had that quality it got when he was managing someone. Warm, a little rough around the edges, like honesty. You know how she gets. She's not thinking straight. If you just... No, Isaiah said. A beat of silence. Isaiah, come on. We built that company from... You built it with Tony's money, Isaiah said. And before that, you built it by pushing me out. I know exactly how you operate, Damon. I've known for 2 years. He didn't say it with heat. He said it the way you say something that has simply stopped being arguable. I'm not your corner. I'm not anybody's corner in this. Damon tried twice more, different angles, same ask underneath. Isaiah said no both times, without cruelty, without satisfaction. Just done. The divorce settlement was finalized on a Friday afternoon. They sat on opposite sides of Yvonne's conference table again, this time with only their attorneys present and a document that had already been negotiated down to its last line. Tony kept the house, outright, her father's name finally resting in just her hands. She recovered the full amount of her original financial contribution to the business, structured as a secured claim against Damon's remaining interest. The forged signature on the second loan was documented, preserved, handed to neither prosecutor nor press, as long as he never contested the settlement. Damon picked up the pen. His hand paused over the page for just a moment. Then he signed. Tony signed below him. 1 year later, the sign above the garage bay read, Maxwell Premium Detail and Restoration. Same name, different meaning entirely. The logo was new, cleaner. The old one had been Selena's work, all sharp angles and a font that photographed well on Instagram, but looked cheap on a van door. The new one was Renee's idea. Simple block letters, navy and white, the kind of design that communicated reliability instead of personality, the kind clients trusted before the first appointment. The garage bay itself held 3 service vans now, up from 2. Each one was scheduled out 4 to 6 weeks in advance. Tony had done that. Not with a photo shoot or a rebrand campaign. She had done it the way she did everything, with numbers. She had audited every service package Damon had ever offered, mapped the actual cost of labor and product against what he charged, found the 3 areas where the business had been quietly bleeding money for 2 years, and fixed them. She raised rates where the work justified it. She cut the contracts that cost more to service than they returned. She brought in 2 fleet accounts, a regional hospital system and a municipal vehicle pool, that together guaranteed more monthly revenue than the retail side had ever produced in a good quarter. Renee handled operations. She had a gift for it that nobody, including Renee herself, had properly recognized when she was just the unofficial bookkeeper Damon let answer phones. She managed scheduling, client communications, and the 2 new technicians they'd hired in the spring. She was direct with vendors in a way that had already renegotiated 3 supplier contracts down by a combined 9%. Isaiah consulted. That was the right word for it. Not partner, not employee, just a man who knew the industry, knew the local market, and showed up twice a month to sit at the work table in the back and talk through whatever Tony brought him. He never overstepped. He never tried to steer. He just offered what he knew and let Tony decide what to do with it. She trusted him for exactly that reason. The business had cleared more in the last 6 months than it had in any full year under Damon. The books didn't lie. They never had. The man driving the white panel van down Creston Avenue on a Tuesday morning was not hard to recognize, even from a distance. Damon still carried himself the same way, shoulders back, jaw set, the posture of someone who has decided that how he looks is more important than how he feels. But the van wasn't his. The logo on the side read True Shine Mobile Detail, a regional franchise that serviced suburban neighborhoods on rotating weekly routes. He was one of 3 technicians they had working that circuit. He turned onto Pembroke Street without slowing. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, same as it always had. The gutters were cleaned. The flower beds along the front walk were full and even. The lawn was a deep, even green, mowed in straight lines that ran parallel to the street. His eyes found the lawn the way they always did when he came through this way, the spot near the left side of the porch where the boxes had been arranged. His shirts, his shoes, his golf clubs, his father's tools in a cardboard box with the flaps folded shut. He didn't slow down. He didn't stop. He drove past and kept going. Selena Vance's name no longer appeared in any of the local marketing directories. Her website had been taken down sometime in the winter, not deleted, just stopped being updated until it went dark. The restitution claim was still open, still unresolved, referred now to a collections attorney Yvonne had retained on contingency. It would move at its own pace. The debt didn't disappear just because the debtor had gone quiet. It was a Saturday morning in early May when Tony knelt down in the front yard with a trowel in her hand and a flat of ornamental sage on the ground beside her. The spot she'd chosen was on the left side of the porch. The soil there was soft. It had been turned over once already, earlier in the spring, when she'd pulled out a scraggly boxwood that had never done well in that light. She pressed the trowel into the ground and made the first hole. The sage was small. Each plant fit in one hand, root ball and all. She set the first one in and pressed the soil around it with her fingers, tamping it down firmly at the base, the way her father had shown her when she was 9 years old. He had grown tomatoes in the backyard of this same house. He had told her that the most important part was the first planting. Get the roots set right, and the rest would follow. She set the second plant in beside it, then the third. The morning was quiet. A neighbor walked a dog past the end of the driveway. The light came through the oak tree at an angle that made the whole yard look lit from underneath. Tony sat back on her heels and looked at the row she'd started. It was small. It was hers. It would grow. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!